Penn State football knows how to build momentum. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. That is Sean Fitz, recruiting expert for Blue White Illustrated. Off of a win over West Virginia, Penn State has racked up now 2 commitments in the class of 2025. Fitz is here to tell you who the latest one is, and this is I hate doing this, and I always do it. This is metaphorically and literally a big commit.
Okay, I thought you were going to go with a good man pun. Penn State, second big commit in 2025 in 2 days. Of course, flip Matthew Outten from Virginia Tech on Monday. Today, Tuesday, Malachi Goodman, previously uncommitted. It was not a flip, but this was one that came down to the end with Auburn and USC. Of course, official visits to Georgia and Alabama as well. Kind of indicative of how good this kid might be. He's one of the personal favorites in the class of 2025, a 4-star prospect by every single service out there and in the On3 industry. The number 130 prospect overall, number 11 offensive tackle, number 3 in the state of New Jersey. He is the new cherry on top. If you go to the commit list at On3, Penn State's highest rated commit is now Malachi Goodman. So a big pull for Phil Troutman, a big pull for James Franklin, and a big pull for the Nittany Lions in the class of 2025.
Yeah, this is a really impressive football player from a bunch of different ways, and we talked about him a little bit on the show on Tuesday in terms of what he could mean to this class and kind of finishing strong in this second half outside of the June-July commitment period. So just curious your thoughts of the timeline here for Malachi Goodman and the recruiting journey. I think that's where I like to start with these is what's the story with Malachi Goodman and his decision-making process to this point?
Malachi has been on his own time for a good bit now. You think about this recruitment. As a whole on the calendar. Okay, you got June official visits. He took his Penn State one the first weekend of the summer visit period. Then he went out and checked out these other schools. And then you would think, maybe turn around and make a decision. He did not do that. So, when they do that, and when prospects do that, you typically see them pop up somewhere in July for that last week, maybe get just one sneak peek, one last look before their senior season. He didn't go anywhere, which was really interesting because, he was not he was not a homebody during this whole thing. He went to Nebraska, he went to USC, he went to Auburn a couple times, he went to Alabama, Georgia, Penn State a few times, Ohio State. He was all over the place. Not a well-traveled, not one of those guys that pops up somewhere every weekend, but he went out and went to enough schools. Then all of a sudden, it's just like, okay, he's got to make a decision. He's going to make a decision before his senior season. And then we were waiting and waiting and waiting. We were on the show actually earlier today and was like, okay, when's the decision going to come? Whenever he feels like it, because that is the type of commit that can hang out, the type of prospect that can hang out, do what he wants when he wants. And I think most schools are going to be okay with it. So this was kind of angling this way for the last couple of weeks. I know Steve Wilfong from On3 put in a pick for Penn State earlier this week. And it's been one of those ones that you're kind of looking at because you look at the final 3. It's very interesting, especially from a Penn State perspective.
Yeah.
You've got Penn State, Auburn, and USC. Auburn and USC famed to be more generous with the NIL offerings. Of course, Auburn's got 5 offensive line commits and USC's on the other side of the country. We believe it came down to Penn State and Auburn. But, I think if you're the pessimist and the Penn State fan, and I'm sure you're out there, but
never seen any of those on the internet. I don't know what you're talking about.
Not. But Auburn seemed to be like the one that kind of scared you because if a splash deal comes in, all of a sudden it's tough to deal with. I don't think the NIL was a huge factor in this one. Of course, Penn State made him a priority from the start. I mean, don't get me wrong; he's one of the top guys and it's been one of the top guys for a long time, especially in that offensive line group. But it was one that was just kind of like, okay, well, he's not really doing anything. He's not really saying anything, but we got to keep up with our sources and things like that. And we started to feel like Penn State. It started to feel like a recruitment that was coming back closer to home. It was one of those ones where, mom's at home and Auburn's a plane ride away, but still it's a plane ride away, and then USC across the country. So
right.
A lot of things in a typical recruitment pointing to Penn State, but you throw the NIL factor out there and you never know. But I think this one's been building for a couple of weeks.
And so just to kind of recap or nutshell some of those things, academics and family, a big thing for Penn State, a big thing for Malachi Goodman, it seems. So, of course, Penn State's going to have a strong advantage in those areas. So, like you said, a very interesting top 3 when you consider all of the NIL factors involved as well. how he fits with this particular group of offensive linemen. I know that we put up the graphic earlier, but just to reiterate, Malachi Goodman is the 130th overall player in the class of 2025 for the On3 rankings, the national industry rankings for On3 itself. He is borderline a top 100 player, 107, and the 11th overall tackle in this class. Tackle, guard, he's got a body that feels like it could go either way. Fitz, what do you think in terms of his positional outlook at that size with some of the length metrics and things that he has?
Yeah, probably a right tackle, I would say. He's playing more left tackle this year, so there's more film to be sorted through as that plays out. But he was a right tackle in his junior film. He's got, until you get to the shoulders, he's got a guard build,
Yeah,
but then he's got length. It's close to 35-inch arms. He's got really, really good tackle length as well. So I
love
think he's a
that.
guy that's got multiple position projections. Like you look at him, you look at his headshot and you think guard. You look at him out on the field and you think maybe tackle. So Phil Troutwine's got options. He's got very good feet. He's got that length that we talk about. They think he is one of the better offensive linemen in the country. You go back to the start of this cycle, and there were three guys that we kind of looked at. It was Malachi Goodman, of course, Michael Carroll, and Zaire Addison from Florida.
Yeah,
And those are the three guys that kind of bubbled up when you're talking about official visits, talking about multiple visits and things like that. Now they get one of the three, which for a while there you weren't sure if it would be maybe get two of them, maybe get one of them, maybe get none of them, and they turned around and got Malachi Goodman. So it's been a wave. If you're riding that, you look at Penn State's offensive line class. Of course, Owen Aliciene is he's a tackle. He's pushing 6'8", or might be over 6'8" by now. But he's a long tackle prospect. Brady O'Hara, also a tackle prospect. He's about 6'6" and a half, 250 right now. So actually kind of the same size as Garrett Sexton was a year ago. So
yeah,
you got those guys, and then of course Michael Troutman on the inside. So you've got options to play around with this, but always want tackles. That's the premium position. See what happens at tackle. Maybe you have to move him back inside. You look at Javen Williams. He's playing tackle right now, but is his best position guard. Anthony Donka started out as a guard. So don't get wrapped up in all that
right.
stuff a year before he shows up on campus. But Penn
Yeah,
State's quite happy to have him. And I think it gives you, it gives you that cherry on top. It gives you that centerpiece of that offensive line class, because there are bigger projections there and Owen Aliciene and Brady O'Hara. You're not sure how they're going to look a year or two from now, but you got a pretty good idea of what Goodman's going to do. Probably, maybe you have to trim down a little bit. We have him at 6'5.5", 315. He's probably about 330 right now. So like to
ooh,
see that come down a little bit. Yeah, he's a
yeah,
big boy. You look at his stance. There's pads there, but there's a lot of Malachi Goodman there. So
yeah,
that's what kind of might bring out the guard talk as well. So you look at him, you look at the feet, you look at the tape. I liked his junior tape a lot. His senior tape, I want to see some more development. You want to see some more growth there. So
yeah.
I'm excited to
Well,
see
that
how
that
he's
330 could be part of it for sure.
that's certainly growth. But yeah, he's got a body that's like Olu's when Olu was a high school prospect, and you weren't sure.
Hmm.
That weight kind of fluctuated with him, and we're going to see what happens with Malachi Goodman over the next year. I'm not getting too caught up in weight. He moves people in the run game, which is good.
Yeah,
But how light are those feet with those added 15 pounds, or wherever he's going to end up at the college level? That's my question for him. Can he get out and when he's playing with bigger athletes? And this is always a fascinating thing when you take a look at high school offensive linemen. There's guys that just kind of knock guys over, but when you get out to pull, when you get out to slide, to kick slide and everything like that, it's a different game when you're playing with guys that are bigger, faster, and stronger than you're used to seeing. So I'm curious to see how this transition will go. We talked about this with Ryan a little bit. Excuse me. We talked about this with Ryan a little bit. When you talk about paying offensive linemen, like paying high school offensive linemen that are eventually going to redshirt. I think Goodman is a guy that's probably going to redshirt in
hmm,
2025. Like, it's an interesting development track, and that's part of the new college football. And that's that'll be something fun to watch over the next couple of years.
I just a couple of things that you brought up there that I find interesting. I kind of want to follow up on. You talk about the top three in this class of offensive linemen, and it's only the fact that Zaire Addison and Michael Carroll were in that group of players that made me think Malachi Goodman was maybe on the third of the athleticism spectrum there, because those other two were insane athletes. But this is, as we mentioned, a top 10 offensive tackle in the country. So that, I think, should that sets the bar for Penn State's offensive line recruiting so far in the class of 2025, where again, Owen Aliciene, we think is a very athletic player that maybe is a little bit underrated right now overall in the process. But to get to Malachi Goodman and to get him in the class, those three players in general, just taking the top three that you mentioned, traits stand out. Maybe Zaire Addison built more like a Javen Williams, where he's a little bit shorter, but highly athletic, crazy level of athleticism. Then you got a Michael Carroll, who maybe he's built more like Cooper Cousins, but in a tackle form. And then Malachi Goodman, I think, has traits that are on that level of the guys we're talking about. And again, those two offensive linemen I just referenced, that their body types and abilities in a general category, those are excellent offensive lineman prospects for Penn State. So this is some elite territory we're talking about. And with Penn State able to add one of those into this class, with that reach and the length and the feet, Phil Troutman can work with that. So whether or not it's guard or tackle, it's a player with a high threshold of ability. And I think that from a film perspective, from a traits perspective, and all the recruit, it all adds up to this is a massive addition for Penn State. And then, as you pointed out, the overall encompassing flexibility of this group, where you've got maybe Aliciene on one end, Michael Troutman as a pure interior on the other end, and then you've got a couple of options to move guys around and work with them. So a well-balanced offensive line group, but that centerpiece, they needed a Malachi Goodman who has those traits that are not a projection. They are there intangible. Let's talk. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, and is very important here, because offensive line scouting, offensive line recruiting is such a crapshoot. It's I don't want to say impossible, because you have players, but like there's no prototype. There's no truth serum in terms of finding the right guy. You've got a guy here that's 6'5.5", 330. You go back a year, Egan Boyer was 6'8", 240. You've got Garrett Sexton, who was in that group. Brady O'Hara in that group. Aliciene kind of in the middle there, as he continues to grow, although I think he's probably lighter than we give him credit then, or just when you look at him, you find that. And then you go back another year. Anthony Donka is a guy that carries his weight so well because he's just so naturally massive. You take a look at body fat numbers and things like that, and his is lower than you would think just looking at him, because he's a freaking massive dude. But at the same time, he carries it well because he's naturally, you say big boned, but he's naturally that big. Is Goodman one of those guys that can do that? And then that's going to help him in training. That's going to help him in, just growing into what he will be at an athlete at the next level. So that'll be interesting to see when he gets onto campus. Do they take him down to 310, 305, something like that, and then try and figure out what the next step is? Or do you just roll with it? Phil Troutman has done that before. He's had guys that come in at a similar weight that they're going to play in. And of course it's reshaping, but at the same time, from the outside, it's not that much different. So be interesting to see where he fits in the spectrum. I think he's got some athleticism. I think he's probably, a little bit heavy right now, but that's for him to decide for his senior season, things like that. So I think it's a great get. They got him at 107 on the On3 rankings, 130 on the industry rankings. I think he's a bona fide 4-star guy that can push for maybe an All-American status one of those games. So Penn State up to number 16 in the country on the On3 rankings. That's up from 17, of course, with Matthew Outten yesterday. So a really, really good shot in the arm at a time when it's not that active in 2025.
Yeah.
So Penn State going on a little bit of a run here, and I think that's a great thing, especially when you take a look at where their schedule is. You get past West Virginia, and then all of a sudden you've got 2 MAC teams, a bye week. You're going to probably be riding high heading into Illinois in a couple of weeks, which should be a fun atmosphere. So, just a little bit of recruiting momentum for Penn State as they continue to search for the finishing touches for this class.
You mentioned, and we talked about this, of recruiting interest or buzz during September with the schedule of MAC team by MAC team. Now we're talking about this class here, 25 commits. I just want quickly here in the last minute, 90 seconds we have to project forward with this class. 25 commits right now with Malachi Goodman in the group. There are still players that you have talked about, we have discussed over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. I should mention, subscribe, promo code PSU1 to get all of this information, 2 months for just $1. What is the outlook for the rest of this class in terms of where they finish from a numbers perspective? 25 is usually the number that we're considering as we now are making decisions, right, about what is out there and what's valuable, and have to make some calls on that. So where do you think this number might end up, and is there still room?
With roster direction going the way it is, and that's the expansion to the 105 number that's been thrown out there, and you're still trying to figure out how that's going to work at the next level. You're not really as crushed in terms of you got 25 guys, and usually that would be like, okay, pull that out of there. So you've got options. You're going to look at receivers. You're going to look at circling back on the guys, especially in state that they missed on. We talk about Lex Cyrus, you talk about Andrew Olish, you talk about some of those guys that makes sense from an in-state perspective. You're still trying to fight that sort of stigma that you got whooped in Pennsylvania in 2025, and you can do that in 2026. But it also helps to do that if you can turn it in the last second 20 or the last few months in 2025. So I think that's where they're at. I think a little bit more flexible on adding numbers. You've got the offensive lineman was such a key, I think, because looking at the needs to numbers standpoint, that was the one that really stuck out, was the offensive lineman. Then all of a sudden you go out and get Matthew Outten, so you've got another receiver. So you're good. Like, you were good on numbers at receiver. Now you're really good on numbers at receiver. So
Yeah.
you still want Lex Cyrus as an in-state addition, but at the same time, like, they'll be okay. So
Yeah.
you go with that. Running back should be good. Quarterback should be good. You got to hang on to your guys. I think that's an underlying thing here. You've got commitments from California, Kansas, all over the country. So it's a situation. A couple of guys in Florida, of course, Florida's always fun. But you hang on to those guys, and all of a sudden you're feeling pretty good. Penn State does typically do a pretty good job about that. So feeling pretty decent. I think some of the additions here at the end have really sort of, I don't want to say made the class, but made the class a lot
Yeah.
more palatable for Penn State fans who were really tearing their hair out about a month or two
Yeah.
ago.
And consider the fact that you have Max Granville was supposed to be a part of this class as well, already on the roster. So this is turning, I think the narrative is turning around on the class of 2025, and we'll see how all of it plays out and it finishes. The best way to do that, subscribe to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. And as an addition, as a bonus, you always are going to have us here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel to bring you the recaps at the end of the news. And that's what we're going to do the next time there's breaking news from Blue White Illustrated and Penn State football.